Hello everyone, welcome to the Everything Dodgeball podcast. I'm your host Stefan Leitinger, and today I'm here with two ladies of the English Lions, Charlotte Josiah and Abby Gower, both playing for the Bedford Mighty Eagles. We've been trying to do this for half a year basically, and I've got a lot of critique that I don't get women on enough. So that was basically like one of the first podcasts I tried to set up, but it's not that easy to get all the life circumstances through social media, especially to find a date. But we finally made it. I'm really stoked that we could make it. Everyone's fed. Everyone's got something to drink. So let's do this. Ladies, how are we doing tonight? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really good.
So maybe Charlotte, I think you started before Abby, right? Playing dodgeball.
Yeah, I'm also probably quite a bit older than Abby as well. So I think I met you, Abby, when you were about 15, 16, maybe. That's when we first kind of maybe met. So yeah, I'm been playing a little bit longer than Abby, but probably not playing too much longer, I don't think, because you started very young. And I only got into it at university at like 19. So actually, even though we might be age different, I'm not sure, maybe playing years might be quite similar, maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it is, to be fair. I kind of properly started playing, I'd say like competitively at, about 15, 16. 27 now. So quite a while playing competitively.
Okay, so Charlotte,
sure.
What was your first dodgeball experience and what was your first international appearance for England?
So my first dodgeball experience was at university. My now husband said he was going to, his housemate had made a dodgeball team and he was going to compete in a tournament. And obviously, being at university on a weekend, I had not much else to do. So I said, hey, I'll go along, I'll watch it. And I just remember watching the women and thinking, hey, we should get a women's team at our uni because I think I could do that. And then one thing led to another. And now many years down the line playing, I don't think I was playing very long. And then England kind of got set up, and it was actually Abby, your PE teacher, who was the coach at the start, wasn't it? So that kind of got set up, and it kind of snowballed from there, really, from playing. Me and Abby seem to be quite interlinked somehow from our past background, because we, at different ages, both played for Norwich football, both then now playing at Bedford, now both played at England, but without knowing each other when we were at that point. So it's so I think I played in a friendly against Northern Ireland. That was my first outing in an England shirt. I think it was just a friendly. So yeah.
And when was that?
Oh, I want to say like 2009, 2010 maybe. I might be completely wrong on that, but I feel like I was about 20. So
okay,
about then.
Okay, awesome. So quite a few years of dodgeball. Awesome. So
yeah, quite a few.
So you basically had like the standard dodgeball starting of a career for dodgeballers our age. We basically all started playing at university, and there weren't a lot of youth programs. At least in Austria, there was nothing. There wasn't dodgeball before like it started. And so, Abby, how did you get into dodgeball? Probably about the PE teacher that we just heard. So tell us how you got into dodgeball and what were your like first experiences?
Yeah, so as Charlotte said, my PE teacher was one of the first England coaches. So we always played it a lot in school because of her. Not even just on rainy days when you couldn't go outside to play football or whatever. We played it a lot anyway. So she started doing dodgeball training like after school, but it was mainly boys. But there was just me and two of my friends that used to go to the men's training. One you'll know is Lauren Hems. was one of them, and Holly Edmonds, if you remember her from England a few years
Yeah.
ago. We used to go to the men's training sessions, and then a few other girls started coming to them with us. And yeah, we just kind of thought, you know what, we can enter a women's team. There's 6 of us. That's enough. And we actually entered a university open, but we were only like 15, 16. We entered as no one knew who we were. We were literally children compared to everyone that was there. I can't remember the teams that were there, whether you were there or not, Charlotte, but
No.
nobody knew who we were. And it was really quite fun, actually, to just kind of turn up, play dodgeball and go home, and no one knew who we were, and we never appeared on the scene again for another 3 or 4 years till we were at university ourselves. So that was like my first competitive sort of dodgeball experience, playing against people quite a lot older than us. And then my first international tournament was the European Championships in Glasgow 2017. So yeah, I think I got into the England squad in 2016. So the following tournament was my first one.
Okay, that is cool. So basically, the more of I'd say like more of a modern approach where you find dodgeball in school. At least that's how it's starting to develop in Austria now, that we try to get more into schools, and it basically went through the PE teachers in Austria as well. So there are a lot of PE teachers playing dodgeball, and through them we sort of got our feet into the schools, and now people play dodgeball in school. And back then, like 10, 12 years ago, we never played dodgeball. At least in Austria, it was always Völkerball, and it was just played with one ball. So it was still like throwing at people, but there was no variance of the game with more balls. At least I didn't play it. And when I started, or let's say 5 years ago, if you ask someone what is dodgeball, no one had any clue. And now it's starting to be more popular in schools as well. So apart from university, was dodgeball something that was played in schools in your youth?
I think it was mainly for like a wet weather lesson. So if we couldn't go outside, you'd play some kind of variation of dodgeball in the sports hall en masse, probably like 50 versus 50, all the balls in the middle, and just a bit of a free for all. So there's always been a little bit of a variation. You've kind of, it wasn't brand new to me when I went to university, but it was on the competitive side, and actually there were, proper rules. There was, it was played 6-a-side, and I didn't realize there was such a structure. When I was growing up, it was just literally a wet weather lesson. Let's throw balls at each other. So that was my experience from school.
Okay, so tournaments like you participated in 2010, 2014, I don't know. How long has dodgeball been around in sort of an organized way without the international tournaments? Was there dodgeball before that in the UK?
Before international, I think so, yeah, because I think it was more kind of coming in the university. So I think when I was started playing, most of the teams in and around the UK were all university based. So I think then as it's kind of grown, people have left university and then established community clubs. There wasn't as many community clubs. I remember the leagues were pretty much just all university clubs that seemed to come together. We didn't have school tournaments or anything like that when I was at school for dodgeball, because it wasn't seen as a sport with necessarily the rules and all things like that, and it wasn't necessarily taught. But I'm a PE teacher, and I obviously take it into the school I work in, but there are tournaments now. There are, whether that's primary or secondary school, there's even college, and obviously it feeds into university. So people are much more aware. And I think there was a recent study that came out that if you ask primary school children what's their favourite sport, football was top, dodgeball was second. So
Really?
kids want to play it. Yeah, kids want to play it.
That is
Yeah,
awesome.
so it's just finding the avenues. And now with the club structures, and British Dodgeball are pushing for clubs to have juniors. So there is obviously that pathway, which I think will be really important moving forward.
Yeah. Okay, that is really cool. So basically there was dodgeball structure around before 2010 or something like this. Okay.
Yeah, I
Do
think
you
so.
know
Yeah.
when the cloth balls got introduced or when they were standardized as the balls that the UK uses?
I'm not 100% sure. I think I've always played with cloth balls, but they were the bigger ones.
Yeah.
So I remember when we first started, it was like almost like throwing a balloon. But um, I think it's always been cloth since I've played, but I don't know before that. Abby, what would you have played with at school?
Yeah, I've only ever played with cloth, even when we were 15 at school. I don't remember playing with anything other than cloth, to be honest. Um, so I wouldn't really know when that became a thing,
Okay,
when that
that's
got
interesting.
introduced.
Because in Austria, we
Yeah.
didn't know those kind of balls, basically. So I've never seen them before Chester
Mm,
2013. Like at our fun tournaments, we had rubber balls and foam balls, and like every time they tried something else and it was never great. So they changed it till the next time because it was dangerous for some reason. And in school, we played also different foam and rubber balls, what we just had, or maybe even volleyballs. But like if you remember, like in 2013 in Chester, we had those yellow cloth balls, and that was basically the first time
Yeah.
I've ever felt and touched a dodgeball, and was like, and those were the bigger ones, and without many logos on them, so they were really slippery back then.
mm.
So, but the women played with the smaller ones, even in Chester, right?
We had
Uh,
to play with this larger cloth balls. When I first started, anyway, for a long time, I played with the bigger sized cloth balls that I don't know. I'm probably over exaggerating.
Yeah, they're
I
really
could
big.
not hold it. I used to have to sling throw because I just could not grip that ball because my hands are so small.
Yeah,
Um,
that is
and
true.
for a long time, um, yeah, like my first tournament, I used to sling throw at Glasgow Euros.
That
You
is
watch the
really
back
funny.
footage,
Yeah,
I will be sling throwing because I just couldn't do it.
true. Because like
And I
we,
think
sorry.
it's all right. I was just going to say, I don't think they got the smaller cloth ball size got brought in till like, I don't know, like 5 years after I started. I feel like I was at uni.
Okay. I really thought in 2013 they had smaller balls for the women, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all. And the thing was like we played with those balls and we got them a few weeks before to try them out before the European Championships, and it was really hard handling them, but the women really struggled, and we had almost all of
Mm.
our women who started or played in the first team were handball players. So they couldn't sling throw. They were all throwing normally, but you almost couldn't hold the ball. And there was
Yeah.
just one woman in our team who could actually hold and grip that ball, and she could really rip it. And it was completely weird. And then we went to Chester, and every one of the women team slingshotted at the ball, and we were like, okay, that's how you throw a dodgeball. So that is really funny because the big balls were, even for men, they were quite tough to grab,
Mm.
and even some male players slingshotted back then, which is,
Yeah.
looking back, that is completely crazy. Okay, that is fun. So
but there was actually when they decided to bring in because originally they were just going to bring in the smaller balls for women, and I was all for the smaller balls because just biologically we've got smaller hands, and it's just the way it is, and actually it's a throwing game. We should be able to throw it. But we were met with a lot of resistance from women players at the time who could throw it half decent, either kind of cupping it or slinging it. They did not want to change. They did not want to change the ball. So it was met with quite a lot of resistance. And actually, in the end, I think obviously it changed for the better, but the women who didn't want to change it was because they could catch it quite easily. And
yeah,
I think right in the beginning, it was a bit of catch ball really, because you threw
Mm.
it not that hard because you couldn't grip it, and then you just get caught. So it was just going backwards and forwards with the catching. So that we did meet with a lot of resistance for changing the ball, which seems crazy now because you've even got people now saying, "Oh, I can't grip the ball."
Yeah.
yeah, that is really crazy. But I think that's like just everything everywhere if you want to change something, you're going to meet a lot of resistance. And I don't know how it's in the UK, but I think they are quite conservative, what I know about like changing stuff as well. And like even us, when we switched to 5 balls, we were like, what is this madness? And when we switched to the smaller balls, the men were really happy about that, because we thought like, okay, we can finally really throw balls. And basically back then we couldn't do anything else. So that was fun and good for us, but still like all the changes are always met with resistance. So I don't give that any weight at all at this point anymore, because it just takes people to get used to the normal to the new stuff. But as you said, looking back on it now, it's almost impossible to like picture us playing with 3 big balls, which is so weird. So
Yeah.
let's get back to that. And how did you, Abby? You were 15 at the time. The balls were really big and you couldn't grip them basically. Why did it
Yep.
still why did the game still intrigue you, and why did you start playing dodgeball?
I just really enjoyed it. Like, genuinely, that is the main reason that I carried on and wanted to go to our club training, like outside of school. Like I say, it was with the boys who are 3 years older than me, 4 years older than me, that I used to train with. Yeah, I just genuinely loved it. And I think because it suits everybody, you know, you don't have to just be good at throwing, or, you know, you need catchers, you need dodgers, you need throwers on a team. Like, it's not just one sort of skill set that it uses. And I really liked that about the sport, and that it's so dynamic and like changes all the time. And like, I'm just so competitive that I like that you can be winning 1 second and then suddenly you're not, and you have to like ramp it up another gear. Um, and that is pretty much why I carried on playing and still play now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, at least. I think that makes a lot of sense to every
Yeah,
player out there. It's just fun, and you can throw and you can do stuff. So it's just
yeah,
awesome. It's just intrinsically really fun. So back then there basically wasn't a big dodgeball scene, especially on the women's side. I guess that's I don't know, but from the things you talked about. So you started training with men as well. How was it in the beginning when it was basically a more male dominant sport, and how did that change, and what do you think is now, is it a different sport that you can start from a different place compared to back then, if you know what I mean?
yeah. So I think, yeah. Um, well, training with the men, first of all, obviously to start with, was a little scary, just because they were a lot older than me, and I was very small, very little compared to them, and ultimately they could throw it a whole lot harder than I could. Um, However, I do feel like it really shaped me in a way, because I was still catching them balls, I was still dodging them balls. Therefore, it's like, you know, still getting that reward from, um, even though they're older than me, bigger than me, whatever. It was still going well at times. Um, but yeah, I think anyone else kind of looks in that scenario and would be like, you're crazy for wanting to play against boys 4 years older than you. Because at that point in my life, you know, in secondary school, I was literally 12 when I was going to these training sessions, and they were like 15. That's quite a big jump,
Yeah.
you know, at that sort of time of your life. Um, but I do think that the provisions for women's dodgeball now is so much better. And I just think like a few people have obviously just taken that jump and thought, like, same as Charlotte at uni, yeah, we can get a women's team. We need to get a women's team to these events. And like, I think it just takes a few people to sort of pioneer it, and people will follow, because as we've just discussed, like, the sport of dodgeball is so welcoming to all, I think, just because you can be, there's throwers, dodgers, catchers, etc. You know, it doesn't have to just be good at one thing, you know.
I think in the early days, I don't know if I'm speaking for you as well, Abby, but training with the men, and as you said, you were able to catch them, dodge it, and do all the things that did it. Almost, it like propelled our way, because actually we're training with the men, we're playing against men, and then when it started to have more women's provision, it was like, oh, this isn't as bad as playing and training against the men. So I think it actually just kind of exuberated our skill set and allowed us to be at the top quicker than maybe we would have been otherwise. And also from a mixed point of view, I think it's one of the things that I love about the sport is that there is a mixed division in it, and actually we all have different roles within the team, but it's well within the realms of possibility that in a mixed setting, a woman can catch the guy and hit them out and move out of the way, and they've just got as much value as the men on the team. But I think in the early days for me, especially playing and training against the men regularly, week in, week out, made me a better player. And I think it's probably allowed me to keep playing at a high level for as long as I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so as well. And I think you can really like see the difference of female player who like to play mixed and some who don't like to play mixed. So like there is just a different dynamic. And I think it's the way you said it at the beginning, Abby, like it is so cool if you go to play dodgeball and you're not the best there, and you can throw like them, but you still have fun because there is a big part of dodgeball, which is dodging and catching balls. And like this can be so rewarding as well. And I think sometimes the game seems to be reduced to like the big throwers, but really it is about dodging. And it is about all those different aspects. And if you can really value them for yourselves or for the teams, that is something that is like really inclusive and really cool about the game, where you can really take part at, even though maybe you can't throw it back then, probably those big balls, you almost couldn't throw them probably at male player. There was basically no point at that, but still you could play a full game of dodgeball and have a lot of fun. And I think if you have that mentality and that mindset, that is such an important part of the game, and you really enjoy that part of the game, it translates so well into really competitive dodgeball in the end. So that is I think a really cool aspect about this. And we also have women who are 13, 14 in our training session, and we split those training sessions up between the beginners and the advanced, but they always want to stay and they play against me basically then in the end. And they're over there, and I'm sort of in my head, I'm like, how can this be fun? And I'm really trying my best to not hurt anyone, but still sometimes there's going to be a ball going at you way too fast. But if you have that mindset, it doesn't matter how old you are. And I can remember back when I was playing football and stood in the goal and I was 12 and 20-year-olds were shooting at me, and it was still fun. So I think that's probably a mindset thing, and that is really cool to hear that is something you can always bring to the table. And if you enjoy that and are not afraid of balls, that is such a fun aspect to the game. That is, yeah.
Yeah, I think dodgeball is a sport where it's unique in the fact that you will get rewarded for hitting somebody with something.
Yeah.
So it's like, especially when I'm teaching in my lessons, it's like, throw this ball as hard as you can at somebody else, and I will praise you for it if it's on target, which is, complete opposite of some things that you get taught in school, don't throw things at each other. But I think that's what excites people about it, is actually, I can throw things at people, and actually you're trying to throw this at me, but I'll move out the way, or I can catch it. So it's quite rewarding quite quickly, I think. And then even if you get out, it's not very long to wait, or especially in competitive games, you're only waiting, maximum 2.5 minutes if you get out in under 30 seconds. But in school I don't tend to do as many outs, but it's just rewarding. And I think children, and as you're growing up, and it's just a sport that it's different to others and unique, and I think we should always keep that side of it, especially with the mixed, because everybody has their different job role in that. And I think, I don't know about you, Abby, but especially playing both women's and mixed, we are used in very different ways in both of those squads, and I like that. I like being able to go, right, my job here is not what I do in the women's. I've got a completely different job role in mixed, and that's fine, and I'm utilised, and I'm going to be using my skill set slightly differently to how I would in the women's.
Yeah, I do feel the same. I've got a very different job role compared to women's when I'm playing mixed. And yeah, being able to use skill sets in different ways is like just another element to the game, really. And it's like, again, that can be transpired into if you just play women's or just play men's. Like, if you're going for catches and it's not really happening, it's like, okay, that's fine, I'll move out of the way, and then you can start dodging. So it doesn't mean that you're like, out of the game because you're not catching very well on that particular day. You can move on to dodging. And yeah, I just think it's a really cool element to be able to fluctuate between the different skills.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that is really, really good to hear. And I think that is maybe the one thing about dodgeball that really takes it apart from every other sport. And I think the opportunity to really have a mixed game where you can actually play against each other and together with the other sex without any changes to the rules, without any change of the whole setup is such a cool thing. And to see it as a unique part, because the mixed game is different, but it is still completely dodgeball. And I think that is so unique to this sport. And I studied sports, so I had a lot of like really competitive women who like to play any sport. But in other sports, it's often so hard, and there are just a few sports where it's really possible to really be on a competitively equal playing field, basically. And I feel in dodgeball, even though you have different roles, like your life is just worth as much as the next one's, and basically you have the same worth in the end, and like the stuff you contribute to the game is exactly as worthy of in order to win or lose that game, which is something very special. And I think something that is really, especially I'd say at this time, it's really modern and inclusive, and something that is such a unique point. So I personally really love the mixed game, and I think it's so great for schools and stuff like this as well. So I think some countries, and I thought maybe in England it's a little bit the same, but tell me how it really is. Like, I think some national programs like often treat the mixed game as like a sort of second tier game, especially in leagues. I know it's harder to get that many women, so sometimes you have the male players, but you don't have enough women to make a team or something like that. But how is that in England? Because I think in Austria the mixed league is the most competitive and the biggest league, because you can put both sexes in, and it's something that really almost everyone enjoys a lot. And I think there are really, really few women who don't like to play mixed, even at the highest competitive level, where there is like, it's not dangerous, but it's like really fast going and it's a competitive game. And so you would think that some people might be afraid of that, but I think to the contrary, that most women really enjoy that, and also enjoy that role of being an equal player on that playing field. So how is that?
I think from my point of view, and I know, Abby, we've had conversations about this before, I think our women and men league are set up and run extremely well. We're very lucky to have an exceptional venue within St George's Park. You couldn't ask for better, which is very different to how the mixed leagues are set up. I think at the moment, British dodgeball don't see the value as much in mixed side of things as they do this single gendered, and that would be based on the fact the venues that we play in are not appropriate. We're still playing wall to wall, which doesn't help, because we're playing dodgeball, but yet we're not being rewarded for dodging because the balls are bouncing straight back. I think we would do a lot better, and I think there is the enjoyment there. I think loads of women enjoy it. I think the men enjoy it. The mixed leagues, there is that sense of enjoyment, but I think it would be enjoyed a hell of a lot more if we had the correct venues to play in with open courts, so that actually every time you did dodge and you faced an attack in play, that actually you then got the chance to retaliate. Because sometimes the better teams will just, it's almost like target practice, isn't it, Abby? It's just like they're just peppering against the wall, it's coming back, which also then from our point of view doesn't help for mixed teams and the mixed players then coming and filtering into England and playing on international stage, because the game is completely different. When you're playing to a wall, I mean, as a caller, I will play the game completely differently to a wall than I would do an open court. So I think there is a way to go at the moment with the mixed leagues and how it's viewed by British Dodgeball and how it's valued by British Dodgeball. I know it's not easy to get the venues, but you know, there's a lot of people within the sport, within the UK, who are advocates of mixed and want those. I just think we want equal leagues, equal opportunities across men, women, and mixed. And at the moment, I just think we don't have that.
And do you know the reason why it's treated this way? Because obviously there might be some financial and other aspects that you don't get St. George's Park as much. But if there are so many people enjoying it and playing it, why doesn't it have the same standing in British dodgeball? Do you have any clue or any speculations, or is that?
I mean, I will speculate that it's financial, that I think some of the halls and the venues that we get is because it's cost effective. They're not appropriate. I mean, the facilities are not great. I mean, some of the places we've played in, Abby, is we've gone from playing world championships in Austria to one of the dingiest sports halls I've ever been in the next week. And it's like, how there's just so much differentiation between the two, and it's like we need to get this better. There's the teams. I mean, we now have a North and a South league, so there are the teams there. We've got the numbers definitely to have a top tier league, but I should imagine it's coming down to financial. I may be wrong, but I think because we've got North and South Super and League Ones in both, haven't we? So we've got a good number. I think we would get more women coming and starting their mixed journey if it didn't feel like it was a training session of just being peppered on the wall, because you know they're just getting absolutely hammered when it's to a wall, and you know, when you're playing against Tamas and Steve and you know all of those big arms. I mean, even for me and Abu, we go there and we're like, oh God, that's just hit the wall and bounce straight back. Now we've got to face it again. It's almost training practice, throwing practice for them, which isn't what the game is. You know, even in the women or men's, it's not what the game is, and it's not, you know, it's not representative of the sport that we play. Like to a wall is not the way we want to keep playing, and it won't help internationally as well. So
yeah.
Absolutely. So playing against the wall just sucks. It just destroys the game. There is, as you said, it's target practice. I've played in Manchester at the World Cup, and I played the Invitational with men and mixed, I think, back then. And we played against England in the mixed and against Steve. And I was like, okay, and we had in the mixed, we had just a few women who weren't really dodgeball players because our women were playing in the World Cup. And then we had just a few who were sort of playing dodgeball sometimes. And then they were playing up at the wall against Steve. And I can still remember that, like hearing those balls hit the wall next to me. And like all our women wanted to quit after that game. And yeah, basically that's how you make mixed unequal, because if you have it to a wall, it's basically just about throwing power, and then you can't play mixed. So that is how to destroy mixed in a nutshell, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like you were saying, Charlotte, obviously I'm a middle, like my role in mixed is to kind of sit in the middle and dodge like my life depends on it. And there's only so many times I can do that before I get hit. You know, I dodge 4 and then get hit on the 5th, and it's like you're not rewarded for them 4 that you dodged before you get hit, because the ball's just going back every time. And there is only so much you can do. You can't do it all.
Okay, now that is crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, would be interesting to really get an answer for how or but why it is set up the way it is, because I only heard it from Basti back then when he was playing for Spartans,
Mm.
and always when he played mixed, it felt and it was like sort of a second tier, second league sort of setup, and I was like, that is really weird, because I also think like in Austria we try to really push the mixed league because it's much easier to get three women playing dodgeball than to get six or nine. So it is something that even on the fun side, like we have a few fun tournaments where it's just universities and stuff. And so it's much easier to tell them, okay, get three women who just want to play a little bit of dodgeball. You get 10 guys playing with them, but it's sort of a good entry point to the sport, because I think it's not that easy to like get 6 or 8 women and say, okay, let's make a team and enter some sort of club league. At least from my experience, that's not as easy, and that's really making it more of a barrier. Whereas if you have 2 mixed teams, then you have a women's team, which is really cool. And you have women who are probably playing at a different level and with different commitment to the sport as well. Okay, so I don't really remember when the mixed game was introduced to the international dodgeball. Or was it in Austria in 2014? I think it was in 2014
Yes. Yeah.
where we
Yeah. It
introduced the
was.
mixed game to international. Okay, yeah. So basically, from back then, where it just started, where it was basically a different ball type playing in the mixed and the women's, which must be really stupid if you come from the women's and then you have to play with those big balls. Um, was the backline back then different for women and men as well? I feel like the
I
backline for women was 1 meter or something shorter in the beginning when it was just the big balls.
I don't remember that. I don't remember that.
I
But
somehow feel
um,
it is the way, but please someone fact check me, because it's probably not true. But for some reason, I have that in my mind, where it was also where you had to learn new lines like it is in foam, basically. But
Mm.
like coming from that and playing mixed, Charlotte, how long have you been playing mixed? When was like the first international appearance in the mixed?
oh, you're putting me on the spot now.
You're not that old.
I'm not sure. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think recollections of Austria in 2014, but I can't remember pre that, to be honest.
But I
So I
don't
don't
think
know
there
if
was
that
anything
was.
pre that.
No. So I think that was pretty much where it started. And I think obviously from international, because there wasn't any previous to that, I don't think there was any opportunities. I think we just had it that there was a lot of women training with men. So that was almost most training sessions at club and university were mixed all of the time anyway. So the introduction of mixed um, at international, it didn't seem too much of a jump to include it in England training. I know there was actually quite a wait until we actually introduced mixed leagues, because I think that's been recently new, really. We've had a lot of mixed opens before that, so like one-off tournaments, but the actual league structure, I think it's taken a while to kind of formulate and actually get going. So I know that I definitely played mixed internationally before I would have played it regularly at club, for competitive situations. But as I said, most training, I mean, even now, most training, all training is mixed at club level for us. It just makes us better players, I think, personally. I like playing against the men. I think, their speed and agility around court only makes you have to up your game and your resilience as well. That actually, sometimes we'll train and we'll be the women's team, we'll be playing against our men's team, and it's not like, oh, they got us out. It's like, actually at the weekend when we're playing the women's team, we're going to smash them, because we're already competing, going toe to toe with our men's team. So the women's team will be a drop down and we'll
I
absolutely
think my
smash it. So I
internet
think that's the
connection.
mindset of us, especially at Bedford.
Yeah. Okay, I'm back. I just had a little bit of a minor glitch in my Wi-Fi connection. Yeah. Okay, so I think that is so true. Like the mixed game is such a valuable thing, and it just improves the game, and especially like on a training um, level, especially for the women, it is really cool because you have so many people who are at least at the level you are throwing at, or you're at the what you are moving at. So you have so good sparring partners all the time, which I think is something that is really cool. And in other sports, or if you don't have the numbers in women and you're just 8 women in a team, then it's really hard to get that competitive training going. And so if you have that mindset, that is just such a well, yeah, it's such a win-win situation. So I don't know how or why you wouldn't include the mixed, or why you wouldn't give it any more of a standing a ground to stand on. So from like 2014 when it started internationally, how did England and how did they basically treat the mix? So I know for Austria in the beginning we didn't have enough players, so basically the mixed was in the beginning just sort of our fun team. I mean, in the beginning every team was our fun team, but then we tried to do it more competitive, and then we put the competitive people in the different um, gender divisions, and the mixed team was just people who wanted to have fun there, or our development squad later on. And then at some point, and I don't know exactly when, but I think either around, I think 2017 in Glasgow was the first time for us where we had double players who played mixed and women, and where we really switched it up and tried to bring the 3 best teams basically that we could put on the floor, and where we started putting our best players together for the mixed team. How was that in England, and how did that like develop over the last years?
I think even from the beginning, when we had Jonathan Rudland as our manager, he would always strive to have the best teams, the best performances with the best outcomes. So I think even from the early days, we've almost tried to field our best team for mixed and men's and women's. The only time I remember it not being was maybe the 2016 World Cup, when they were in completely, different halls and different things. But I think for the most part, we've always had a massive overlap of people who play in the women's and mix, men's and mix, because ultimately England has always wanted to go for 3 golds or compete very highly, get 3 finals. And the way that we do that, even in mixed, is by fielding our best team. And our best team and best players at most points have been in both. So I can't really remember a time where we've ever kind of said, really, it's a kind of second thought or anything like that. So I think we've always been trying to put our best players in.
Okay. Because many nations do that very differently, and we had lots of like different discussion what our aim was with the mixed squad, and it's basically a discussion every year how many players we play double. In the past we had like the 4 best player from every gender played in the mix, and then there were 8 only mixed players, and then it was 6 players who played double and a few only mixed players. And then we had problems with like the team cohesion at some point, where it was really weird between the only mixed players and the double players, and it made for all sorts of different, I wouldn't say problems, but it was just, you could feel in the team that like the team cohesiveness wasn't there. And now like the last few years, I think since the World Cup in 2022, I think that was the first time maybe where we only did 12 women, 12 men, and then 6 each, or 7-5 for the mixed team, to like build also a very cohesive mixed team with like a team spirit, so that it isn't like a few women come over and play mixed, a few men come over and play mixed, but they're more separated. So how is that in England, and how is that for the national team? How do you feel is like the different team vibe between the different genders and the mixed team?
I think because we have always kind of put the mix on the same playing field, especially in England, and we've had that massive overlap from the beginning of men and women from single genders playing mixed. I think we've now got quite an experienced mixed team, especially at Worlds. We've played together for years, the men and the women. So looking at people like Brett, Tamas, Arnie, Alex Harrison, me, Lauren Hems, obviously Abby, like we've been playing together for mixed internationally for a very long time. So there's always that kind of tight knit group and understanding of what each other brings, our strengths, and what we might need to work on. And obviously, we've got different players coming and going in of that, and rightly so. People are fighting for places, and we'll always be fighting for places. But I think because England have always kind of put them on a level playing field, I think we've got that team cohesion and understanding of each other. Because we've been playing multiple tournaments now. So
Okay. And so, Abby, I sometimes hear from players, like I've talked pretty much to every woman on our squad, like they have sometimes a little bit of a transition period or problem when they have very different roles. Like I remember, like at the World Championships, I talked a lot to Lisa before that, Lisa Leichtfried, because like her role on the women's team is such a different role. And I would think, Charlotte, it's probably the same for you, where you like the shot caller in the women's, and in the mixed it is different. For you, Abby, you are more, especially in the mixed, a middle player, and also in the women's probably more in the middle than on the wing mostly. Is that, how big is the transition for you, and how long, like, do you need any warm-up period, or do you, like, when you go into a mixed game or a women's game, do you approach them in any way different?
I think when going into a mixed game, the most important thing for all of us, I think, is to just obviously make sure we're warming up against one of the men's arms, so making sure we're throwing with them. Um, and I think in terms of warming up for mixed as well, I need to make sure that I have I'll do more like plyometric warming up, so like I'll be doing a lot more jumping and getting down low, because yeah, I tend to play in the middle a lot more for mixed, so I need to make sure that like I'm moving well. But other than that, I don't tend to approach the games differently. Um, Other than I kind of put my mixed head on, and by that I mean I know I have to just move out of the way of the balls. Whereas for women's, I would say I do play on the wing a lot more in women's. Um, so predominantly we'll have a ball in my hand. Um, so I'm used to blocking, whereas in mixed, I don't have a ball in my hand very often. So I don't have a ball to block with. So I need to make sure I'm actually moving and not moving in the same way every time as well. So like that's why I mean doing the plyometric sort of warm ups, whether that be jumping and then going straight down low again. To try and vary it up a little bit. But I don't think I have anything that's sort of like specifically mixed warming up
Mhm.
other than that.
And what do you feel like is like more intensive, let's say just at the highest level, like a game against Austria, Northern Ireland, or something like that? Do you feel like a mixed game or a women's game is more strenuous for you personally as a player?
I do think that they're both sort of strenuous for different reasons for me personally. Um, so for women's, I feel like I say, I play on the wing predominantly. Um, so I feel like my approach to the game is quite different. I have a ball in my hand a lot of the time, so I'm in control as to whether I throw or don't throw that ball. So if we're up in a set and we just need to see the timeout, that feels very different in women's compared to mixed. Because if you then put that into mixed and we're up and we need to see the timeout, suddenly I'm going from someone that has a ball to protect myself to someone that's in the middle being probably thrown at. So I'd say that mixed feels more stressful in them intense games, because I feel the pressure a bit more to not get hit, not make a silly mistake, because my role is so different in women's. whereby I'm kind of running up and down the wing, like maybe probably with Charlotte on the left hand side of me, and we'll sort of be communicating together and deciding what to do together. Whereas in mixed, you're more on the back line, just doing your best to stay alive, really. So I think mixed is probably a bit more stressful for that reason for me personally.
Okay. And for you, Charlotte, so like you do the calling basically for when you're on the field in an women's game, you basically do all the calling, right?
I like to play at 5, so I like to maybe feed in
Okay.
in women's. I like to play at 5. I like to feed in. I like to communicate on the back line. I like to go on the wings, you know, when I can, and when there's rotation there. My role is different in mixed, but I'm still like, obviously I like playing at 5. I like feeding in information. It's just slightly different in terms of what I'm saying. You know, with England, I might have someone like Imi to my left, and I'm feeding in information in the women's. But in the men's, I'm feeding Brett some information, and obviously we played together a long time. I'd say what I'm feeding in might be slightly different. The women's, sometimes I feel like I can take control a little bit and try and calm everyone down, whereas in men's, in the mix, trying to control the men and calm them down sometimes is a tireless feat, really, to be honest. But it's just slightly different. And as Abby says, sometimes, you know, if you're last in and I'm in women's, I look across and I've got Abby there, and we're going to decide, we've got ball in hand and we're going to go aggressive or just, you know, absorb balls and try and keep ourselves safe. Whereas in mixed, you 9 times out of 10, if you've got 30 seconds left, they're probably coming for you. So you need to be alert, on your toes. And yeah, you do have that slightly different job role. I do think actually at times mixed is probably more, I think it's more heightened. And I think that becomes because of the men's energy sometimes. I think that can be very like, I think all men are the same, whether you're playing at club or country. If they've thrown a ball, they think they've hit somebody. So it's, you know, sometimes you're telling them, no, that wasn't a hit or whatever. So it's very different because I think men approach things
Okay.
very differently. They're
I think
very,
Charlotte just lost her. I think probably her iPad lost charge. That is a classic charging problem exit, but she'll be back at some point. Okay. So,
Yeah.
Abby, when was the first time you played for the mixed team, like for England?
For England, my first mixed was the Newcastle Euros in 2019. She's back.
Okay.
hello.
Hey, was that a charging problem or no? You came back way too
No,
fast.
I think it was a connection problem.
Okay. Okay. That's how it looks from the other side. Usually it's always me, so I can only just wait and hope that everyone's still there when I'm back. But okay, that's how it looks. So you're just gone. That is fun. Okay. So in 2019 was the first time you played for the mixed, and have you played every time since then for the mixed team?
Yeah, so since then I've been in the mixed team every time for all future tournaments. Yeah.
Okay. All future tournaments. You've got a guarantee.
As in, I wish I could guarantee and see the future like that. No, I mean, yeah, everything that's been since then.
Okay, fair enough. So, like, how is the selection made in England for women and mixed? Are those made at the same time? Because in Austria we do like the squad, the male and female squad, like somewhere around now, and then the mixed we do it quite close actually to the date of the tournament, because it's always every trainer wants to see a little bit more, even though we play together for the last 10 years and everyone knows everyone, but still, like, the mixed is always for us sort of a puzzle that we try to solve and try to get some more new like experiments in at some point. So how is it treated in England, and how is it for you not knowing if you, I mean, for Abby it's probably easy because she knows she's in all future tournaments, but how is the difference whether you're in the English women's squad or the mixed squad? I mean, for the women's, you're probably sure that you will make it, at least in the near future.
Well, we're actually waiting on selection for Euros, which should come out tomorrow. So
Okay.
fingers crossed for that.
Okay, fingers crossed.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that will be for women's and men's, and then it's quite similar in the fact that I think they're going to trim down the squad a little bit for mixed, and then normally it's picked from the women and men who are going in the single gendered squads. But I know previously there's been talks about maybe mixed specialists, and I don't know whether that might be the case this time, or it might be just selected from single gendered. So I think that always comes secondary. So the women and men's normally gets picked, and then secondary is the mixed.
Okay. And how much later are we talking about?
I think they're hoping this time for it to be another training session, and then it's been selected so that we've got more time together. Previously, it's been a bit longer, hasn't it? In the lead up to it, maybe 2-3 sessions before. So I think they want to do that a bit earlier this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looking into the future, how are your chances, or how are you feeling about playing in mixed and women's in Limerick?
I mean, it's always a privilege to be selected. I think we have a really dynamic group of women at the moment. I think we've got a lot of younger players, a lot of more inexperienced players coming through with an amazing skill set. So, they're pushing people, and I mean, you either plateau or you keep pushing yourself, which is, the best thing for coaches to be, is that actually everyone's pushing each other and we're all collectively getting better. So I'm sure there's been a lot of headaches for coaches and stuff like that to pick that final squad. And I'm lucky enough to work with Simon on some of my input on selection and coaching. But I think it's really great that we've got such a talented group of women at the moment that are coming through, whether they've been playing, a couple of years and they're still at uni, or actually they've been playing quite a long time, but they've just developed a skill set that they're just pushing themselves even further. So we will see tomorrow, I guess, when that email comes out.
That was a beautiful
You can never be
answer.
sure, I think. It's a very competitive squad that we have, like Charlotte's saying. Everyone, whatever name is picked on the squads, you wouldn't be surprised at, I feel. So highly competitive.
Yeah.
I feel like I say it every year as well, but every year it seems to get more competitive than the last.
Yeah.
So yeah.
True. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously for the coaches, that's a luxury, but it's also a headache. So coming from side, I have the privilege of doing both things, like being a player and being part of the selection committee, which lets me basically appreciate both sides. But I wanted to ask, and that was a great answer, Charlotte. So we can become a professional sport, because that was a perfect answer for an interview. Because I know it's like a really stressful thing, especially for our women. Like, you can really feel the last few training sessions before selections are made, because the pool is so tough. And also, like, for the coaches, it is really tough. And those decisions are like such minor and feeling decisions in the end, because there is no objective way to quantify dodgeball statistic, at least for us in Austria, where you can really know what the right decision is. So basically you watch one more training session, but we all know we've been playing for such a long time that one training session doesn't mean anything, basically. And then basically a decision has to be made, and that is always stressful, because at least, and I think for you guys that's definitely the same. Obviously we want to play in every division and compete in every division, and especially for female play, it's such a different thing to play in mixed and female, especially at the international level, which is something that I think everyone at that level really wants to play at that in both divisions. So that is I guess that is not something easy to wait on, but it's not that decision yet. So basically, you're fine and you're quite relaxed today because it's just for the gender, and you're probably fine. I don't want to jinx anything. So otherwise, I'm just gonna delete
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
this podcast.
I'm coming for you. If I don't get in, I'm coming for
Yeah,
you.
it's just
You
because
jinxed it.
it was between you and Abby has just privilege for the future tournament. So I'm sorry.
I can see the future.
She saw the future.
That's a good advantage to have. All right, so let's get a little bit in the past. So basically, it's almost half a year on the dot now. The last big tournament, the World Championships, and then not even, I think it's 5 months, no, 4 months, I think someone said in our group, till the European Championships. So basically, we're at that sort of halfway point where squads are selected, national training picks up, and everyone's starting to prepare for the next one. So for a last time, let's dive a little bit back into the last big event and just give me a little bit of a recap for how the week went and like the expectations, also then moving into Euros in Limerick, and how you enjoyed playing mixed and women's in Austria and Graz. Let's start with you, Abby.
Okay, so trying to rack my brains as to how it all goes. Obviously, we were working really hard in the lead up to Worlds in Austria, having just won Euros for women's. Obviously, we wanted to try and carry on that momentum going forwards and into it, and we did have a bit of a shake up with our squad as well for women's. We had a few new faces that come to Worlds and make their debut for England, which was really good to see, and you know, fit into the team perfectly. You wouldn't have known that it was their debuts. Everyone sort of put in that solid performances throughout the group stages. And I'm just trying to think sort of what happened after that. In terms of mixed, I feel like we put a bit of more emphasis on mixed this for Worlds this time, Charlotte. I think if you might agree or not. We wanted to really push our mixed squad because we've always been, wanting to strive for reaching the finals, and we put a lot more work in at trainings. We didn't want it to be a second thought thing for mixed trainings, and we were bringing in tactical decisions and like trying to bring the game to a new level rather than just relying on our skill sets, which was nice in the lead up to Worlds. And then I guess just to recap the end results, we ended up losing a semi-final to Northern Ireland for women's, which, to just put it, bluntly, I suppose everyone was a little disappointed with at the time. Charlotte will definitely agree, but what's important is bouncing back and coming back into that third place medal game with new mindset. You've still got a game to win and the chance to win a medal, and I was incredibly proud of all of the girls to pick themselves up, and ourselves as well, myself and Charlotte included in that. We had to pick ourselves up and go again, which shows a different type of resilience than a lot of us. Obviously, fortunately, we're in a lot of the finals, so it just showed that we can do that as well, to show that resilience. And then, obviously, had an incredible final in mixed against you guys, Austria. I feel like it was a really exhilarating game of dodgeball. Real spectator one to watch. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just waffled loads then and really said nothing.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, you have the youngest brain of us, so you should remember best, but we'll try as well.
He's not good.
Okay, you have no kids, no sleep deprivation. Probably sleep deprivation.
I have no excuses. My memory's just terrible.
So it's a problem if you're squeezed between two parents. There is no reason you cannot sleep more. Okay. Charlotte, do you have anything to add to that? And also, like I would like to get that mindset of coming from Osijek, from European Championships, and winning golds there, which was obviously like a long way in the making, and which was a really, really great performance and sort of a breakout performance where there was like so many years where it seemed it was impossible to get that gold, and then you won that, and coming off that momentum towards Graz, what was like the feel in your team?
I think obviously, as you said, it was a long time coming to win gold at Euros. You know, we've always seemed to make the final, but not quite get over the line. But I think one thing which is difficult to do in the moment, especially when you're facing another silver medal time and time again after Euros, is that actually what Austria and England have done for women's dodgeball has been exceptional. I think it has really propelled how exciting, how fast paced, how skillful all of the players are. You know, it's difficult in the moment because you're like, oh, another silver medal. But actually, to step back and just see that actually two teams have been going head to head for many finals, and actually it's probably, I mean, I might be biased because I'm a massive advocate for the women's sport, but I think they've been the best finals at, you know, most of the time. And we came out on top at the more recent Euros, which is a long time coming, but again, it just showcased how amazing women's dodgeball is. So I think, you know, we're always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and we finally got over that mindset. And I think it was a mindset thing. I think we've got a lot of players who, you know, like, oh, come on. I think the mindset for some years has been, come on, let's try not lose this final. Whereas I think the mindset when we went to last Euros was, we're going to win this final, rather than, you know, feeling nervous about it. And also, I think we played a bit carefree in the fact, like, oh, we've got to another final. You know, the worst outcome for us is another silver. So, you know, that's just what it is. So actually, I think we played a bit more freely. I think going into Worlds, there was a more of an expectation. It's like, this England team have just won Euros. Let's see what they can do at Worlds. And I think we did have players who maybe, I don't know, I don't want to speak for them, but maybe felt that a little bit. I think there was maybe an underlying tone of going back to the mindset of, oh, I don't want to lose this. I think, you know, I want, instead of we're going to win this. And I think just that slight mindset maybe put us on the back foot. And then in that semi-final, we had too much to do. But as Abby said, I was incredibly proud of the girls for picking themselves up, dusting themselves off, and coming back and putting a very convincing win in the third place. But I think, you know, credit to Northern Ireland, they played incredibly well. But I do think over the years, it's been Austria and England that are leading the way on women's dodgeball. And I think every other team are, you know, striving to play the skills and the tactics that England and Austria play. And I think, you know, other nations are catching up, and they are developing. And I think it's been a good show of women's dodgeball over the years. So I think moving forward, I think we've had a lot of time to reflect. We were quite lucky after Worlds as well. We had quite a lot of time where we didn't play dodgeball, which seemed a bit surreal, because for the last however many years it seems to be back to back. You know, you finish international, you go straight back into league. So it was quite nice to have a bit of downtime and now reflect. And hopefully, moving forward for Euros, when the squad's announced, we'll have that group of girls, and we'll work on the fact that, you know, sport, that happens. You can't win them all, but it's actually how you bounce back, and actually the performance that we go forward. We can't change what happened, but we can change what we're doing to change the outcome for the future. So I think the girls are in a good place. We're in a really good place. We're a really strong knit team. And I think actually in the long run, you know, that loss will actually just propel us forward even more.
I think could have said it any better. So like you mentioned it there, like in Osijek, there was sort of a bit more of a free feeling to the English team. And I really felt that back then, like that the game Austria versus England is such a loaded game, and it's been so many finals, and it's always the final, and it's always a close one. And I know it's been in our women's heads for the last 10 years, basically. And it's basically been my job to get it out of their heads for those games, and I've successfully always failed at that, but managed to almost hold on for some reason. It still worked out. And at this point, like the last Euros, we had a really great Euros, and we didn't have a great preparation before that, but we had a great Euros. All the games, everything was flying too smoothly, and you could really feel it when the pressure, like till the semifinals or till the final, there was no pressure basically at all, because it just clicked and it was just a bloodbath basically. And then we knew it would be England, and we knew we were in a really good place, but there has nothing been there that was testing us, and we knew this was gonna be a test. And I can still remember going back to the day we were in all three finals, but and I think, I'm not 100% sure, but for some reason I think the mixed final was the first one, and obviously we won that in overtime, sudden death, I don't know what. And basically afterwards it was like the pressure fell off, but like the anxiety was still there, and it was not possible for us to get back in that game. And it was a close game, and it was a game both teams were in it, and it was close as always, but it always felt like the willingness and the readiness of the English team was just on that day there, and ours weren't. And it was like it was meant to happen. And from the outbox, I can really remember feeling really helpless, and I didn't know what to do anymore, because I knew we could win this, but I also felt we could not win this at this point. And it really felt like it was just meant to be. And then obviously the final phase with um, Alice, her crazy stuff in the end, and all of that. But it seemed like that was basically the flow of the game, where there was one team that really felt free and was just not afraid in that setup basically. And then, as you said, bouncing back is the most important thing. I think it was a really important growing or learning experience for us as well. And having that before the World Championships was actually really good for us. And I've really felt that, because we have been winning so close for the last 5 years or something. I don't know even. But it was always like the pressure just built one step higher. And we won again, but it was close. And we won again, but we knew we could have lost it. And then finally losing that, and knowing that life goes on, and like getting the chance to come from the underdog. It was never an underdog, but like coming from a freer space, and like really going there to win and not lose the streak, was just something that really helped set the team loose. And so we played each other in the group stages, and once I saw we had you in the group stage, I was really happy about that. Our women were really not happy about that, but I personally was really happy about, because I wanted to try the ice hockey lineup, basically the two lineups. And I was like, to me, I don't care how this game, it was probably the same for you guys. It was like a free test run of a potential final. And it was just such a nice atmosphere to play this high level game for once in 10 years in a group phase and not in a final. And that was like, for us, obviously that game going really well, that basically set us free. And basically from then on out, I had a really nice week as a women's coach, probably the nicest time of being a coach in the last 10 years. So how was that? So talk me as a captain, knowing that you play Austria in the group stages, knowing you have sort of the pressure is on you now for a weird reason, how it always is in sports, and then playing that game and then continuing on. How was that for the team?
I think for us, I was a bit like you in the fact I was like, yeah, having Austria in the group, that's great for us, because there's no pressure. Well, there shouldn't have been any pressure on that game, because actually the outcome didn't matter, because we'd both go on I would assume, and go take on whoever. Having each other in the group didn't faze me. That's not really how I felt from the rest of the girls. I think they wanted to show and go out again and be like, right, we've beaten them once, let's beat them again. And I think they played less freely as they did before. I mean, me and Abby desperately tried to tell them that the last time we had them in the group was in New York. We beat you.
I remember
beat
that
you in
as
the
well.
group, and then beat you in the beat you in the final. So it has been done. It can be done. So let's not worry about it. And actually, I don't know if you felt it as well, Abby. I think they had put a lot of pressure on that game and focus on that game. When actually, as you said, it was a game where there wasn't any pressure, because realistically we were going to come first and second in the group, hopefully, and hopefully have met again in the final if it went that way. But I think that game kind of set the tone and put a little bit of the girls on edge for the rest of the week. And then again, I think the mindset was, if we play them again in the final, we're going to do this. But you have to have each game as it comes. We have to get there first. And unfortunately, I think some of the girls were maybe thinking one step too far and didn't focus on what's in front of us. And I think that's an important element that we will take forward, is that, of course, we want to be playing in the final. And, the past few years have shown us it's normally us and Austria, and we want to get there, but we have to get there. And actually, Northern Ireland were going to show us that it's not a walkover and it's not a given that you're in the final. You have to work for it. And actually, I think when it started to go wrong in that Northern Ireland game, it didn't fit our plan. It wasn't our plan. That wasn't our plan, that we were going to struggle in the semi, and actually trying to gear each other up to get through that game. It just wasn't there that day. So I think we'll take forward that actually we need to focus on each game as it comes. So I think it will only benefit us in the long run. Difficult to tell the squad that when, they're devastated they haven't made a final. But actually, looking back now, I think it will put us in good stead for Euros.
Anything to add, Abby? How did that feel playing? And like, you're also a very seasoned veteran in that team, even though you may not have our years. But how did you see that game and what it meant for the tournaments?
Yeah, I sort of do agree with what Charlotte sort of said. England versus Austria has been for years the pinnacle of dodgeball, particularly for the women's division. For a lot of people, it's a big spectacle, and I think when we play each other in a group stage, it is for both teams a good chance to sort of test the waters a little bit. And yeah, I think it was hard. It's hard to shake the nerves that are there, because there are ultimately going to be maybe a few more nerves for a lot of people in that game. But yeah, like Charlotte said, we sort of try to take the pressure off. But ultimately, I think it being so soon after Croatia, obviously it was like a group game of the next main tournament, maybe was a bit too soon for a lot of the girls, because obviously we've just come off of a big win that we've waited a long time for, to then face you guys so soon. We really want, I guess, a lot of the girls, and of course you want to win every game, don't you? You obviously want to put on a big show and really try to showcase what we're all about again. But you have to just take it one set at a time, and it was a good experience. We managed to get game time and get people on that hadn't played against Austria before, actually, I think is what we did in the end. Charlotte, you might correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we did.
To try and reduce that potential, I'm going to say, anxiety around playing Austria if people haven't done it before, because it's always been in the final. But I think it's important to reiterate that it's a group game, and ultimately we're going to be first and second of the group if all else goes to plan. So yeah, I feel like potentially put a lot of pressure on ourselves that wasn't needed.
Okay. How, like, that pressure is something I feel is a really big, also kind of a big difference between maybe the men, the women, and the mixed game. At least for me personally, it feels like this, but I have very different roles as well. But how is it for you guys, where in the women's you are basically like the pillars on which the game rests in very many ways, and you also are one of the experienced players, so it's also your job to keep everyone calm, keep everyone pointing in the right direction, and really managing also the mood of the game and of the team. How is that different to the mixed team, where, as you said, you have to try to keep your boys in check, which is a whole different problem on its own? How is that a different vibe, a different approach, or a different challenge?
I think with in mix, the men will always play a bit freely anyway, sometimes a bit too freely. So you're trying to rein them in, and sometimes in the women, you're wanting them to be a bit more free to play what's in front of them. So I think sometimes it can be different in the fact that in one mix, you're trying to rein your men back in. In the women's, you're trying to get them to play that little bit more freely and a bit more with their instinct. So just, not as cautious, and just play without that fear or anxiety that may be there, which I just don't think sometimes the men fear. I think they go the opposite way and just go, oh, I'm going to throw as many balls as I can and get you out. And women kind of sit on the back foot sometimes. I think that's the difference between, especially our women's team sometimes, and the men's, and having the men in mixed and reining them in. I don't know what you think, Abby.
Yeah, I agree that is sort of the main difference. Is trying to, I guess, get the balance in mixed, in terms of, going for it sometimes, but also the men in particular, like, you want them to stay on court for as long as possible, don't you? So it's getting that balance between going up and getting your hits and being aggressive, but also not selling yourself out in the process.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suppose that's everyone's tactic in mixed.
Yeah.
A lot of nations will be the same, but
yeah, I think that's probably a very good generalization, and I feel exactly the same way. Like when I do basically the training session for the men's, or the tactical analysis, or setting them up for the next game, it's basically me just telling them, use your head and don't trust yourself. Trust the process we've been developing, but don't go just with your gut. And for the women, I'm like, that we have the background, the process is there, but you have to trust in yourself to just play. And basically, like, the default mode of a male player, not everyone obviously, but is basically to just, I want to do it in the situation, and this is going to work out greatly. And when it doesn't work out, the answer is always like, but usually it works out. And for the women, it's more like, why didn't you throw in that situation? And the answer is like, what if she would have caught me? And I'm like, yeah, sometimes shit happens, but I really want you to throw that ball in this situation. And for the male player, I'm in the same situation. I'm like, don't you ever throw that ball in that situation, because I'm still knowing he's going to throw it anyway, but maybe he's going to hold on to it once or twice. And if the female player throws it once or twice more than she would, then the balance is restored, which is like basically obviously an overgeneralization, but like that is really my switch from playing in the men's, then coaching the women's, and then trying to bridge that balance in the mixed game, where it's like, where you need your women to be really aggressive and really loose and really take risks, because that is such an important part in the mixed game. If a female player who is really good and can throw really hard and takes risks at certain points and makes difference because of that risk taking, and because of, there is still, even at the highest level, there is still some underestimation going on, and there is still someone who doesn't look the same way as at his female and male opponents. So there is a lot you can get away with, and if you fill that void with aggression, there is so much you can do. And so trying to really get those three players to play as aggressive as possibly, be really committed to the dodges, and to the male players, just keep yourself alive, play smart, don't waste any throws and stuff like that, is, I think, a really fine balance, and something that makes it interesting, but also like uniquely challenging to bring that together. And as you said, it's often the women who are in the back, like, hold the ball, screaming at the boys, and the boys running in the front doing stupid stuff. So I think like that interplayer relationship between the genders on the field as well is really, really cool, and also something where good teams get a lot of value from. So if you have a really good team where the players trust each other, and you know your female middle player is going to protect you in certain situations, and you know she's going to dodge in certain situations, and you know she's going to make the hit, and she knows she can trust on you to give her that protection or that pressure, then it can be such then you can get so much more out of that team. And if you don't have that cohesion and that play and the respect and the knowledge of every player, what everyone brings to the table, then it can feel like two different parts that don't fit together, and it's just playing against three male players and three women players on their own, basically. And I think that is sometimes what sets apart really good mixed teams, where you still feel that cohesion and that team feeling. And against other teams, it's like, okay, get that good guy out, and then you play against a women team maybe. And I think that's really interesting how that is so different. Like in the men's team, even if you play a team that is really not as good as you, they're still gonna throw as hard as you probably. And then in the mix, that's not the case. But the tactical interplay between the players is so much more important to fill in those gaps that are just naturally there.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm glad we're all facing the same issues, because the amount of time me and Abby are at the back screaming hold to some of our men, I'm glad it's not just us.
No, I think that's one thing I really learned, and I figured that before, but I didn't knew it, but now I really know it. And it's also something I always tell my players. It's like everyone is basically facing the exact same struggles. And then you look at the players from the outside and feel like, wow, they look so, everything is perfect, no drama, everyone looks so mean and confident. And then you just look behind the mask and you're like, okay, all the same insecurities, all the same bullshit, all the same and stuff like that, which is something I think is really fun about the game, and also makes it so relatable. If you don't have just the faces of the teams and the players, and like in your head they're sometimes so big, but in the end they're just dodgeball players from another part of the world, but they're pretty much made of the same stuff. Yeah. Okay, so switch a bit from that if you still have a little bit of time, because there are two things I want to talk to you guys about. And one thing is, and maybe we start with Abby, even though you're quite young, you're still like relative to your age, you've spent most of the time of your life playing dodgeball, basically, if that makes any sense. So after playing for such a long time and really seeing it from university, from school, and playing at the world stage, basically having won everything that you can win in dodgeball, what still keeps you going, and what like motivates you to drive 2.5 hours from a league meet at 8:30 in the evening when you got probably something else to do as well?
I think it feels like dodgeball is kind of like ever evolving. So like even if you're at the top of your game, there's always something to improve on. There's always new tactics to try and implement in your team. There's obviously, like we were kind of discussing earlier, we're 6 months on from a tournament or a major tournament, and we're already 4 months away from the next one. So it's kind of just like there's always something to work towards, whether that be at community league, we're aiming to win the league this year, for example. And then there's working towards that, as well as international. So there's always something to be working towards. And my motivation has always been, and probably will continue to always be, the team, and the people around me. We have to work hard, not only for ourselves, but actually for each other, because if we're all putting in as much effort as we can, then, you know, the results will come. And we work together and we're all on that same sort of page to try and achieve the same results. Yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, that's, in my book, that's a good reason. Okay, so in Charlotte, coming from the perspective, at least at what I have heard, and I think that also leads me into my next question, is like, obviously you have 2 kids, you've been around for quite a long time. You are not 20 anymore, so I know from personal experience, dodgeball gets a little harder on the body and sleep is harder to come by. So especially you both of you playing in the same teams and playing at the same league meets and stuff over the last few years with 2 young kids, that's quite a struggle from personal experience. So what keeps you motivated to put on in all that work and still enjoy the work and the play?
I think for me, underlying is just the love of the game. I absolutely love the game. Um, Also, in my life, nothing has changed since I was about 7. I go to school. I'm just now a teacher, and at the weekends I play sport. So
That sounds like a
it's
dream
very
for a
comforting.
7-year-old and a 30-ish-year-old.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So nothing really changed. It's a comfort. Like I would be lost if I didn't have things to do at the weekend and sport and be competitive. But dodgeball, I mean, I've been around now for a while and I'm aging, but I think the drive is still there. I still want to get better. And I think that's important. I think the game's developing. I love where it's going. I love what, it does for women's sport. I think, as I've said before, the women's game is fantastic. The mixed element is fantastic. And I just get a real sense of enjoyment, even in those really high pressured situations, the final at Euros. I was beaming most of the time. I just love it. I just love playing. I love being in that situation, whether it be for club or whether it be for England. So for me, is a real sense of enjoyment. And now, I guess, being a parent, there is that driving factor that I want to show both of my children that, I'm more than capable. And actually, I think it's more important to show my daughter that actually, life goes on after having children. You can do lots of stuff, and actually, women are very, very. I want to empower her to take part in sport because boys' sport. There's going to be always boys' sport. Boys' sport's going to be there. Men are going to play. I'm not too worried about my son. Whatever he chooses to do, there will always be a team for him. But growing up, being a footballer who was a girl, and there wasn't that many teams. There wasn't, I'd have to travel quite a way to play for my team. And I think I want to inspire my children as well, but more importantly, empower my daughter to understand that women are strong, women can do whatever they want. And I think you can show that in mixed as well. And she'll always ask like, "Oh, mummy, are you playing just women or are you going to play with daddy today?" And she watches, and I think they just absorb lots. And I think that's important to show them that you can do anything, and especially from a female's point of view. So I think that kind of drives me a bit now, but my underlying is always I just love the game.
Yeah, that is a really good and powerful message, and I think that is really sums it up perfect and is a good cause as well. So basically, dodgeball is just fun, and it doesn't matter how old you are. It's still fun. Those situations, especially if you have been a sports person for your whole life, those are the situations you live for, and those are the situations that give you so much motivation and so much joy. And I think for me as well, like sharing that with your kids and like just being the living proof that this is a path that brings so much joy and fulfillment. And you can see all the friends that come from that space, and you can see mommy's other strong friends that also throw balls really hard at people, which is such a cool environment. And we've seen it like in Austria. We have always like the Kolnik kids. If you have seen them around, they're now almost grown ups, but they started 10 years ago when they were like really tiny. And basically they've been part of the Dodgeball Austria journey since day one, more or less, and been partying at 7 years old at Madison Square Garden and 10 years old in Edmonton and stuff. And like, I think the dodgeball community is such an empowering community for all children, and such a positive community where you can really see that on the one hand, you can play hard. If you practice a lot, if you put in the work, you're gonna have success and have fun. And there is a place for everyone in that community, and everyone is respected, everyone has a place, and everyone has the chance to prove himself. And in the end, we're all friends, which is also something that not many sports have in that way, where you can really go just to a league meet and know your kid's going to be fine. No matter who they meet, they're going to be in good hands. And you can basically trust most of dodgeball scene. Maybe they're going to drink alcohol a little bit too early, but other than that, if you don't keep them away from the Swedish or the Austrian, they're going to be fine, basically. And I think that is...
Well, I also have two other driving factors in the fact that my daughter has also said that she wants to play dodgeball with me on my team. So I've got to keep going. But also, I'm not her favourite dodgeball player, which hurts me greatly, because Abby is her favourite.
Obviously. And Abby's going to play in all the future tournaments, which we should not...
Apparently so.
Which is awesome.
So she can play with Daisy.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. You still have something to strive for in life, being the MVP for your daughter, which is, I think you'll always fall short no matter what, but still it keeps you going and keeps you up at night. But okay, that is awesome. That is a really good reason as well. So I think the last point for me is, I think over the last few years, we've seen dodgeball evolve a lot. And the women's game, as you said, evolved, in my opinion, the most, because when I saw it the first time in 2013, it was with big balls. It was a lot of not that athletic people who had fun at playing dodgeball, but it evolved into such a much faster, much more intense, much more athletic sport. And if you see it now at the highest level, those are really 6 athletes playing against 6 top athletes. Everyone is really capable in so many ways. And there are obviously different nuances and strengths, but those are all really capable, complete dodgeball players. And the women's game is so, I think, at some point even more full of variance, because like the catch is just something that is more possible in the women's game. So it's more balanced between dodging, throwing, and catching, compared to the male game, which is still much more throwing heavy. So I think it is, and I've been a great appreciation. I have great appreciation for the game, also coaching it for so long and seeing it evolve and seeing what is possible in that game and what is possible with really good teams. And so I think, Charlotte, you are basically like the embodiment with your fitness transformation or career. And that's sort of the last thing I want to get into, like that transformation. What got you into that? And I only see the stories, and I've known you now for a long time, and you really embodied like the different stages of the dodgeball game. And what you embody now is really what it needs or what it takes to play dodgeball at this level, and being able to play at the older dodgeball age. We're not going to say how old we are, but so I think that is such an important part for the game, and such a professional part, which I think you showcase perfectly. And I just want to tell you that I've watched it from the outside, and I've been really impressed, and I'm every year impressed in what shape you are, despite having kids, training, all the stuff around. It is absolutely awesome to see. So just give us a little bit of an insight into that process.
Well, thank you for that. I think, as you said, it's developed so much. And I think right at the beginning, you could pretty much just ride on the talent and just see where it took you. And luckily for me, my talent got me quite far. Like, it got me in the squads that I needed to. I think it then, as you said, it's changed, it's evolved. Players were getting better, and I think you just turn around and think, right, well, okay, I love the game so much. I want to keep playing. What do I need to do? And I think a turning point for me really was COVID, having my daughter and then wanting to come back. And I was like, right, if I want to come back after COVID, after having my first child, what am I going to have to do? So I did a little bit of research into what other sports are doing. So like quite a lot of like baseball, what they're doing in the gym, handball, what can I do to make my throw better, to make me more explosive, to make me more agile. So that was really a turning point, and actually I've got to keep going. I know it's, in terms of my age, got to keep up with the youngsters, and I think that's just, I've put in a lot of off court work, and I think even now our England team, if you're not putting any work in off court or very minimal, you'll get left behind quite quickly. People will overtake you. So for me, it's a driving force. I still want to play. Okay, what do I need to keep playing? Okay, I need to be in as good physical shape as I can be, doing lots of stuff. I'm very fortunate that I've got a very good PT who will strive to make me better, is always preparing me for the next stage of what I want to do, the next thing, because as Abby said, it comes up thick and fast. So we've 6 months we've had Worlds, and now we're striving to get into Euros. So it's just knowing what my goals are, what I want to do, and the real drive to want to be at the top still. And that just drives me forward. That gets me up at 5 a.m. in the morning, keeps me there at night at like 8 p.m. because I have to juggle that with the kids as well. You don't want to miss out on the kids, but also, in order to keep doing the things I love, I've got to put the work in off court. So it's just juggling everything.
Absolutely. Juggling. That's, I think, the most fitting term for dodgeball, life, and kids. That's just juggling. 3 things, and you always, one ball is always on the floor and one is always in the air, and you've probably got plenty in your hands as well. So basically it's just dodgeball. That is, and I think that is also such an inspiring message to send out, because we have seen it now in the Austrian team as well, where there have been a few young mothers who came back to dodgeball, some of them extremely soon. I mean, Kathi Weber, I think, played 4 months after giving birth at the World Championship and became MVP there. And that was, like, to me personally, completely mind-blowing at this point. I would have never thought that was possible. But you see, like, what the love for the sport and the community gives people in motivation to do all that stuff, even though from an outside perspective, if you're not in that dodgeball cult, basically, you might think, what the hell are you doing? You have more than enough to do, and you're just spending all your money and your free time to go to dirty gyms. And then once you're not in the gym, you're going to another gym, working out, that you can go back into the gym on Sunday. But still seeing that dodgeball isn't over at 30, and it's not over when you have kids. It doesn't matter if you're the father or the mother or both, is something that I think is also really cool about that sport, that you see lots of people who just do it for the love of the game, and there is basically no obstacle that we can't overcome in order to keep us away from those dirty sports halls somewhere around the world. Yeah, I think
it's also important that I think there's been a lot more research into women's sport, women's health, and actually what the limitations of women are. Because I think previously, even if you go back 10 years, it's like, oh, you've had a baby, be careful, you can't do that. Women are superheroes. We can do whatever we want. We have to do it safely and we have to return. But actually, we're much more resilient. We can cope with stuff. We can train when we're pregnant, which was a bit of a taboo even 5 years ago. Like, oh my God, don't train. Even when I was training pregnant with my second, I'd get people on Facebook who I might not have spoken to for years going, oh, you need to be careful. It's like, pardon?
Yeah.
Like, oh, forgot that you're a doctor. But actually it's changing quite rapidly, that actually women can do a lot. And actually they are, I think, superheroes. I think just being able to do it, the body is amazing. And as long as you know yourself, you can push yourself as much as you can. And I think, you know, there's been women in England who have had children come back and, you know, performing just as well, if not better. And I've seen it with the Austrians as well, that, you know, we can do so much more than previously thought. And I think that's important.
Amen. Yeah, I think that is a very good to end it all, because yeah, that is such an important statement and such an important example also to give. Like, we have always Eva, like our oldest player, who had 3 kids, and we always have like her stories. She doesn't come from Austria, and back when she was pregnant with her youngest, she played handball, and she played handball till she was, I don't know what exactly the truth is, but rumors are she was pregnant for 7 or 8 months already. So, and still playing handball. And that is quite a different physical sport. So we had like the prototype and knew what we could look up to and knew everything was possible. You can go to New York, play a 2 days world championship with three kids around you. So everything is possible. There is a way, and women make it possible. So I think that is a beautiful spot to end it. So thank you for taking the time, and I think that is a very aspiring conversation for everyone who wants to play dodgeball, whether you're a 12-year-old female and play in an only girls or boys club, whether you are a 30-plus-year-old mom, you still can play dodgeball, and all you have to do is just have love for the game, have a good community around you, and work out. So I think that's a
Yeah,
if anyone
definitely.
has anything to
Yeah.
add to that, my pleasure. Do you have any final parts of wisdom, Abby, like don't get kids or something like that, to bring it back to the ground?
Yeah, I mean, no one really sells having kids to me, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Obviously, I've got all the free time in the world, but no, hopefully it happens for me one day, but we shall see.
Yeah, and enjoy life with kids and without kids. It's important to enjoy
Yeah,
life without kids, but life is still very enjoyable when you have kids. It's just different.
yeah,
Just gotta get better at juggling.
yeah.
But
Just start juggling, yeah.
soon. All right, everyone.
Yeah.
Keep throwing those balls. Try not to get caught. Take care.